How do you know if your marriage is valid for naturalization purposes? I'm Erick Widman. I'm an immigration lawyer. And if you're married to a U.S. citizen, you can naturalize faster than if you weren't married to a U.S. citizen. Instead of the regular 5-year period, you can naturalize in 3 years. But in order to naturalize faster, you must prove to USCIS that you have a legally valid marriage. Most of the time, if you get married in the US, that can be pretty straightforward. And the place of celebration rule is what it's called. If you get married in a place that recognizes your marriage as valid in the US or outside the US, your marriage will also be deemed by USCIS to be valid. I had an interesting case, however, where a couple got married at a foreign embassy within the United States. And so, due to complex international rules, they did not actually get married within a US jurisdiction. So that's one small, interesting caveat to keep in mind. Most of the time, you're married in the US, you receive a marriage certificate that is fundamental prima facie evidence that you have a valid marriage. But if you get married outside the US, things can get a little trickier. Most of the time, it turns out okay, again, based upon that place of celebration rule. If your marriage is recognized as valid, legitimate, and legal outside the US will recognize it as the same in most cases. Here's some notable exceptions, though. If the place you got married at allows for polygamy, being married to multiple people at the same time, that won't be a valid marriage under US law with USCIS. The other criteria, they say, if your marriage violates the strong public policy of the state of residence, that's not going to be allowed either. So that's kind of a general catch-all if they're uncomfortable with what's going on. And if you're in a civil union that's recognized, for example, in Europe or other places around the world, that won't qualify as a legal marriage in the US. So even though it's a legal relationship outside the US, it's not recognized as a marriage. And proxy marriages are problematic. And of course, the final category, relationships entered into for the purpose of evading immigration laws. So if your USCIS thinks and has evidence and you can't prove otherwise that you got into this marriage to evade immigration law, that is not a valid marriage. So the other key things to keep in mind to make sure that you have a valid marriage to naturalize faster is making sure that if a divorce was involved outside the US, you have proper documentation for that. It can be challenging to know in some countries if you have the proper divorce decree, if it was the final judgment from a judge or what other legal requirement is in place in that country where you got divorced. The best way to ensure that you're bringing in the correct documentation is to look up the Department of State's visa reciprocity table. And systematically, you'll see when you go to that website, every single country has birth certificate requirements, death certificate, marriage certificate, and divorce decree requirements laid out in great detail. So that's a reliable resource. The US government put a lot of time and energy into that. And USCIS also uses that for guidance. So to see if the document you have is going to be sufficient to show that you were legally divorced, check out that visa reciprocity chart, the table on the State Department website. So the burden for all of this to prove your valid marriage is upon you. The government, USCIS, will say if you didn't come up with the proper documents, we need you to do so in order for us to show that you can move forward with a 3-year naturalization instead of a 5-year. The burden's on you to show that you qualify for the faster treatment. If, for example, one other key thing to note, if you sadly got a divorce and your spouse also was denaturalized and wasn't a US citizen for that full 3-year period, we're sorry to say that will not allow you to naturalize in that 3-year period. So you would then have to naturalize on your own within a 5-year period. Hope this helps. This can be in a confusing area. Let us know if you have any questions, and take care.